Okay.
All right. Rolling.
Rolling. Wee-ha! I did it again. This is take number 3 on our intro because I keep messing it up by singing Limp Bizkit and then only having the comedy and not the anything other than that. I did it the first 2 times and didn't know where to take it. Luckily, we talked about it, and David's going to take it from now here.
Oh, man. David here from the Meat Block. And this week we are talking about all things humane handling from an equipment and operations perspective. This is a 2-part episode. The second one's going to be about animal handling itself. This particular episode, like I said, is about equipment, maintenance, and the super important roles that those play in a robust systematic approach to humane handling under FSIS inspection or custom exempt, because they should be held to the same standard as per the Code of Federal Regulations and our own moral compasses, because we like to do a good job. So anyways, we've got a very, very special guest today. We've got Chuck Bildstein, Bunzel Processors Division. And as I'll say later in the episode, Chuck's awesome. I saw him with a friend of mine who I used to work with. We went down to San Luis Obispo to the school down there in their meat science building, and went to the California Association of Meat Processors annual convention, and Chuck gave a demonstration on captive bolts, which was so great. I mean, he talked about functionality. He let people who had never handled a weapon try one. You know, there was a lot of testing going on. He's a fantastic teacher, and Travis got him on the show.
Yeah, and it's a long-form conversation. We talk about a lot of things, and we're going to do a part 2 about the placing. So I want everyone to enjoy this, listen to it, and yeah, I also want to make one correction. I heard Chuck and David both say this. It's San Luis Obispo. It seems like you guys want to put a couple extra letters in there. But and if you're a true local, you just call it SLO. Oh, so there, SLO.
Nice place down there, man. It's a beautiful freaking place. I didn't know it existed, and it's pretty sweet. If anybody needs a ranch hand with sheep.
Oh, I was going to say a Rancho San Julian, but they're beef. but they're down there too. And you gotta learn your Spanish names a little bit better, David. I don't know.
No, I've been doing Duolingo. I'm working on Swedish and Norwegian at the same time, because the time.
Because you want it to be useful working in the West Coast of America. I know.
Yeah, bunch of Swedes out here. Yeah, but anyways, part 1, part 2, like Travis said, and like I said, is going to be about the animals and placement and technique and all that stuff. Yeah.
Good cutting enhances the quality of good meat. In his way, the meat cutter is an artist. Poor cutting results in an inferior piece of meat, regardless of quality.
All right, this week's episode is brought to you by Bunzel Processor Division. They've been in the food processing and packaging industry for over 135 years. They offer over 35,000 high-quality products designed specifically to meet the needs of meat processing, butchery, food processing, janitorial, and industrial industries. BPD also specializes in packaging equipment and supplies, offering multi-vac P-Series line of chamber packaging machines, as well as the Clarity line of shrink bags, roll stock film, and vacuum pouches. They have numerous product experts and offer outstanding customer service. And they truly do. I've relied on them a lot of times. And they offer free UPS ground shipping on orders $400 or more.
David, I saw that you joined Instagram for a brief second while we were firing captive bolts in my living room. Did you catch any of that?
I did, yeah. I did catch some of that. That was actually really awesome. I've had that training from our guest
Mm-hmm.
at one point, and it was such an eye-opening experience. I was super, super impressed with the testing unit. I mean, that's like an absolute essential in my opinion. I thought it was really cool that you guys were able to show how that worked live, because 9.9 out of 10 people have not seen one of those, and they are so helpful. So yeah. It's cool. It was a cool demo.
And I that will segue, so we're not just talking ambiguously. I want to introduce our guest this week. We have Chuck in. I emailed you and I called you Charles, and Chuck, you almost immediately corrected me and said no, it's Chuck. No. So what do you prefer to go by? What's your title, and where do you work, I guess?
Okay, I go by lots of different names. I'm called a lot at home, but I go by Chuck. Formal name's Charles, but Chuck Bildstein. Actually work out of my home in eastern Iowa, Anamosa, Iowa. I am a product specialist for Bunzel Processor Division. Okay. Kind of unique with the company in that I don't have a territory other than basically North America. Travel all throughout the lower 48 states. Someday, I'm hoping, maybe my managers are listening to this, but there's meat plants in Hawaii and there's meat plants in Alaska.
Yeah.
So perhaps there will be a day that I can make some plant visits in those two states as well.
I'll just say Brian Mayer, who runs a USDA slaughter out there, just say you need some help and then call up Bunzel and they'll send Chuck out to help you. And the help could be like, I don't know how to take this, open up this package.
Perfect. I like it. I like your support.
Yeah.
But no, I've been doing this for 22 years. I actually started out as a territory rep back in 1999. And I'll be honest with you, questions about boots and gloves and knives and bags and those types of things, it just didn't pique my interest. I'm more of a hands-on kind of a training type of a guy. I like to teach and learn different aspects of the business. And when this opportunity for captive bolt and electric stunning came about in the early 2000s, I jumped all over it just to be able to really engage with the customers. That's what I do now.
That's awesome. So let's I have this romanticized idea of not having a territory. David and I have always talked about, with consulting work or helping people problem solver achieve their processing needs, this idea of like the traveler, So what is your typical day like? How far scheduled are you out? Because I know you're like, I think I could be here then. And then by the end of the day, you're like, all right, I'm booked. I'll see you then. So how does that lifestyle work, I guess?
So COVID obviously has changed things the last year, but typically I was booked out sometimes 5-6 weeks before I could get into a plant to see them. Now there are extenuating circumstances that could change that. As an example, if we had a humane handling issue, a stunning issue, so be it, in a plant that caused a shutdown, I would make every effort possible to get there within, if not the same day, within a few days to help that plant. Be there in person, troubleshoot whatever the issue might be, determine whether it was truly a piece of equipment issue or if it was how it was handled, how it was used, anything mechanical. But typically my day in today's world has been a lot behind the desk. In past, it's been selling and supporting the Jarvis line of stunners or electric stunners for that matter. It is making plant visits. It's doing audits. As an example, the integrated companies, the JBSs, the Tysons, the Cargills, we offer just service to them that's all encompassing. Not only do we sell the equipment and parts and support those things, we also do training. We do safety training and operational training on how to use the equipment to the end users. And then we do full maintenance training. So all the maintenance personnel, whether it's first shift, second shift, or third shift. So I could be in a plant anytime from 4:00 in the morning to as late as midnight, and maybe just starting some of those training type classes. And we do that every year. Then the other things that we do is we actually audit.
Okay.
We're starting to audit the plants, not auditing for Humane Handling, we're auditing the equipment side of things.
Mm-hmm.
And we look at the condition of all the different stunners. Some of these plants could have 20, 25 stunners now. And we inspect every one of them, look for missing parts, looking for wear parts. We look at their inventory level of key components that they have in their storeroom.
Mm-hmm.
We look at their tooling, what they have for equipment for the maintenance guys, what they use, whether it's a well-lit workbench. Then we look at where are the tools used, how are they stored in that environment,
Mm-hmm.
where are the cartridges stored, are they dry, are they in a container? We kind of talked about that earlier today. Those types of things. So we put together a full report for those customers by stunner and by plant location,
Mm-hmm.
and provide that yearly.
Wow.
That's fascinating. Chuck, I really love how you focus on the preventative maintenance part of the humane handling program. You may or may not know this. I used to manage a plant that had a humane handling issue. Was kind of a freak accident, and had to do with equipment that was from a different company. And your team came in and helped us mitigate that NOE. And I think that the most refreshing and totally different perspective that was brought to it was half of the response was really reconstructing the preventative maintenance program around the stunners. And, your team trained us in exactly how to use the stunner, not something that was passed word of mouth from person to person, but we got it directly from the source, from you guys. And you showed us how to use the stunning tester, and you advised us to put together a preventative maintenance inventory log where we have minimum on-hand quantities of inventory all the time, and we had a robust training program that we put into play about after you guys left for the captive bolt stunners and the equipment that go into maintaining those. And it was just such a great experience looking at it from that angle, because really it's not just about the person holding the firearm. There's so much more than training that person that goes into a truly robust humane handling and stunning program. I love that you guys focus on that. It's really cool, and very, very few plants that I've walked into as either a new manager or as a consultant have that program.
Yeah, maintenance on captive bolt guns is so important. It's probably the number one cause of improper stuns in the country, quite honestly. It's just an improperly maintained piece of equipment. Oftentimes I go into these plants and they've had personnel changes, maybe in maintenance or an operational side. And the person that trained this new maintenance person maybe had been trained by someone else 6 months prior. So that training, the trainer type thing, changes. The information gets kind of garbled up from person to person, and all of a sudden you're missing steps, or they're changed steps and things like that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I was going to say, we talk about that with training people on how to cut meat, this idea of essentially, if you have a copy of a copy, and as we all know, the original has the best clarity, but as it goes further on and further on, the edges get a little blurry. This happens. That is just as important with, captive bolt maintenance and humane handling training as anything. I certainly don't want to learn from a person who was in my first humane handling class the next day,
Right.
So, and Chuck, I have some other questions that are a little more specific to your experience with what you find in plants, but just for, we have a lot of people in our audience that are on the retail side of the game, or maybe in a processing plant but haven't worked slaughter. And would you mind kind of explaining to us the two different types of, or the two really common types of handheld captive bolt devices, the cylindrical barrel style and then the pistol grip? Could you just kind of explain how a captive bolt device works and what the process of stunning an animal is?
Sure. So the captive bolt stunners, basically, it's just that. It's a device that has a penetrating rod that is captive to the tool. So unlike a firearm, there's no bullet. There's nothing that leaves the tool itself. It's all captivated within about 5.5 inches of length. So they use a blank cartridge, a 25 caliber, a 9 millimeter, a 22 caliber blank cartridge with no lead on it. Mm-hmm. And that cartridge has the firepower to drive this 3/4 pound steel rod, and it stuns the animal to insensibility with speed and weight, which gives you the kinetic energy to properly stun an animal. The different styles, as an example, pistols. Pistols use what's called a retracting system on the bolt, self-retracting, so it resets the bolt after every shot. So it takes less work for the operator to use a tool like that with a key element, provided that they maintain that tool. Notice that word maintenance is back in there. If you're using a pistol style or a cylinder style tool that has a self-retracting bolt and it sticks in the head, that's a direct indication that you're not maintaining the tool properly. You've got worn parts. Mm-hmm. The cylinder styles, the most powerful tools on the market are the cylinder style with a free flight bolt system, meaning it will not reset itself. And actually, we had a question earlier today. Mm-hmm. Those are designed not to retract and reset the bolt. The bolt will stay outside of the barrel. Just, it could be 1/2 of an inch. It could be 2 inches. That's normal. But you will get a deeper penetration and more power. You can use a higher caliber cartridge or a grain cartridge, a 6-grain cartridge as an example, versus a 1.25 or a 2 grain. So you're going to increase your power level with a cylinder style stunner.
Excellent. So when I order one of these handheld captive bolt devices from you, one of the cylindrical ones, do the handheld versions come in both the self-retracting and the free flight? Can you choose, or is the
yes?
Okay.
Yeah, cylinder styles are available in both. And not only that, they also have we have an impact stunner as well, an impact contact stunner. So that when you put the cartridge in, this is available with a handle on it. It's about a 30-inch, 32-inch long handle. From a safety standpoint, that when it makes contact on the head is what causes it to fire.
Mm-hmm. And it looks kind of like a sledgehammer, right? I saw one of those at a plant in California once. It was amazing. It was a fantastic. You reduce the risk of SRMs and all kinds of things happen there.
Correct, but it's also the primary purposes that we've been selling is from a safety standpoint. In some of the larger plants, say you have a beef animal that's injured on a trailer, or a beef animal just gets injured in the yards or in the Serpentine Drive alley, whatever it might be. Who wants to climb in there with a captive bolt gun with an injured animal? This allows you to stay at a distance and be able to stun that animal.
Okay. Yeah. And can that also be used for euthanization of an animal as an initial blow?
So interesting topic there. Euthanization with captive bolt guns, depending on the size of the animal and proper placement. So the word stunning, obviously it's designed to stun the animal to insensibility. The science of today at the veterinary colleges and so forth are finding that captive bolt guns are able to euthanize animals. Now, the proper design and proper tool, dependent on the size of the animal, is really important. As an example, when you're dealing with a large bull or a sow or a boar, as an example, there's a big difference in skull structure with those animals. So you have to be able to penetrate about 1.5 inches to almost 2 inches on a large sow or boar before you even get to the brain. Yep. So if you were to use a pistol to try and euthanize that size of an animal on a farm or in a plant that's injured, the likelihood is very low that you're going to have an effective kill shot with a captive bolt gun. Understood. An inline tool with a long bolt would do a better job with that.
Okay. And I just want to clear up, in case people are listening, we're talking about, I think what David is bringing up is the euthanization of an animal where we work, we call it knocking or stunning, because it makes it not necessarily what causes death. The bleeding is what causes it. And usually in a euthanasia place, you're not going to stick an animal afterwards, because you're going to end up with a horrible mess.
That's correct.
So in that, what I'm just wanting to clear up is there. A lot of times when you knock an animal, it's it's not going to come back. But in our industry, it's the rapid bleeding that is actually causing it to lose its life.
Yes, so that's correct.
Yeah. And I was just curious about the euthanization, because sometimes I feel like in those situations, you have animals who are oftentimes hard to access, and having that longer reach would be really helpful. But that makes a lot of sense, what you were saying there. One thing you mentioned, Chuck, is different grain sizes. So can you tell us why you would choose a different grain size for the blank cartridge that goes into the captive bolt?
Sure. The main reason is, a lot of people think, let's just use an example of what we have from Jarvis. Mm-hmm. So you have pink, yellow, blue, orange, and black. 5 different levels of power. Pink being the lightest, black being the heaviest cartridge, the strongest cartridge. Let's say I'm a producer or a plant. I do all small animals. I do all sheep or lamb, whatever it might be. And I decide I'm going to use this free flight tool, and I'm going to use black cartridges all the time. Mm-hmm. Well, there's not a lot of resistance on that small animal when you're using that black cartridge. So the wear and tear on the components within that captive bolt tool will be much greater. Your overhead will go up. So it's best to match. And that's why we really like to consult with our customers and get a full understanding of what they're going to be using the tool on, so that we make sure that we pair that with the proper cartridge. In some cases, it might be 2 different cartridges that they would use. It might be a black and a red. As an example, this super heavy duty tool we talked about earlier today, mm-hmm. for bulls, boars, bison, and sows, it's not designed just for those animals. If you power down to a black load, now you've got a tool for swine and for market size cattle. But you can use a red 6-grain cartridge for the large animals. So it's really important from a mechanical and what's the word I'm looking for? A detrimental effect on the components in the stunner.
Yeah, because I worked at a place, like when I first started, all we used was heavy grain cartridges, because it was just like, well, if this doesn't do it, then I don't know. And right. It could be a lamb, it could be, but we were also changing bushings. We had this wasn't a Jarvis model, but we had a captive bolt split its shaft down the middle. Mm-hmm. And just looking back, and I talked to my brother about this before earlier this week, knowing we were going to record. I said, I'm pretty sure we were just overworking that. And he just said, yeah, we absolutely were.
Right.
But
right.
Yeah.
Well, and to add to that, the other thing is from a safety standpoint. Mm-hmm. So, you brought up the tester. In a lot of plants that don't have testers, do you know how they actually test their tool to see if it's working?
Stack cardboard.
Or they just put a cartridge in the chamber, pull the trigger, and fire it in the air.
Ooh. Dry fire.
They just dry fire.
Hi, guys. Just want to take a quick second here to tell you about, or to remind you about Bunzel's Captive Bolt giveaway. $2,500 value. All you have to do is click the link in the show notes and enter. And also, if you don't win that giveaway, don't be dismayed. And if you still want a captive bolt, they're offering a $400 trade-in if you're trading your old captive bolt. So say you want the 25 pistol style, that would instantly make that down to around $1,200, which is super doable.
Which one would you choose, Travis, between the inline or the pistol grip?
So I always found inlines to be awkward, just because it's unlike anything. But after seeing the demonstration of that high powered inline heavy duty one, and just knowing the stopping power of, like, for a bull or a horse, I really want one of those, because I think that could save a lot of people some grief. They had the proper tool to knock the proper animal. What about you?
So when you and I worked together, we used a pistol grip. And then when I moved to plants further down the line, everybody was using the inline one. And I felt like it was really awkward at first, because I was so used to to being patient and waiting for the shot with a pistol grip, but oftentimes, like in a knock box, I find knocking a hog especially challenging with a pistol grip because you just how their foreheads are oriented and how their heads are often down, and but they're great for lamb and sheep, and they're mostly great for beef. I bought one of each. I got one of each because there's times like the hogs are way easier to do with the inline one, I think, and and also if you're in a situation in a beef plant where you don't have a head restraint or a chin lift, and you're being patient but kind of chasing a shot a little bit, which we say don't do, but you know what I mean. When you have to drop down from on top, that inline one is so stinking helpful because you don't have to wrench your wrist to get that 90 degrees.
Yeah.
So
you don't have to square up by also. You don't have to square up your whole arm with it.
Yep.
But yeah, so everyone check out the show notes. Check them out. Check out their tester. Chuck and I did a very thorough, went through their whole line, test firing and everything. It's on their Instagram page. And enjoy the rest of the show. Peace. Welcome back. If you're just joining us, that's not how podcasts work. We're going to pick up the story. So if there's a little overlap, we'll fix it in editing. But Chuck was telling us about how plant workers will sometimes test their captive bolt using dry fire, which means just firing it in the air, and why that is bad.
Yeah. So imagine you're using the strongest cartridge available for your tool, and you're using this on smaller animals. That puts undue stress on the components of the tool, the buffers, the breech, the barrel, and especially the penetrating rod. So if you put that unnecessary stress on that penetrating rod and do it repeatedly every day for months, that can cause hairline fractures in the stem of that penetrating rod. And by the way, I never, ever recommend this, but if you do test your stunner by putting a cartridge in it and just firing it in the air, that does two things. Like I said, first and foremost, it's very unsafe because if you do have that hairline crack in that penetrating rod at that time, it can break off and become a projectile that's going to be operating anywhere from 85 feet per second upwards of 230 feet per second, depending on the tool and the cartridge used.
Yeah.
And you're talking about a piece of steel that is going to be about 3/4 of a pound in weight. Yeah. So that's a lot of energy and can do a lot of damage and injure people. So it should never be done. Never dry fire.
Never dry fire. And Chuck and I were telling, the war stories in the worst we've heard. We'll spare you. But just know that it's very real how mishandling this piece of equipment could cause permanent injury and at the worst case, death.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing is really, what is that dry fire telling you? Nothing.
Yeah, you can't see it.
No. Well, the thing is just because the tool fired, that doesn't mean the tool is in working condition to properly stun an animal.
Yeah, or the PSI is right or anything.
Nothing. All it's telling you is that the firing pin struck the cartridge and the cartridge went off. That's it. We don't know that the bolt speed is correct. The compression's correct, nothing.
Yeah.
So that said, Chuck, people ask me this all the time. I think out of the 20 questions we got for this episode, 7 of them were this question. Is there any way for a small plant who does not have the testing unit to get any sort of accurate testing on their gun prior to slaughter or operationally in the middle of slaughter? Is there any way to test your handheld captive bolt device without the reader unit?
There really isn't. The one thing that we could potentially set up and they could contact us is both myself and a new employee of ours that is a support person for me, and we'll be traveling as well. His name is Ryan Malone. We each have demo units that we have at our homes that we take out for as far as testers. That potential could be that it's not easy to travel with. But if customers want to have a yearly audit, those small customers could send that tool back to one of us we could go through and maintain it, clean it, get it back into like new working condition, do a stun test on it, and provide that report back to them, whether it's quarterly, bi-yearly, yearly, whatever they'd want to do. That's a service we could certainly offer to them.
That's fantastic. Wow, that's really, really cool, Chuck. That would be, I know a lot of small plants that would be extremely useful too. I mean, we have to send out our data loggers for biannual calibration oftentimes, and fat testers and whatnot, water activity testers. So I think that'd be a really great program for somebody to be on if they were able to.
Yeah. Now, and I don't know about the Jarvis Technicians. So there are Jarvis Technicians located throughout the United States as well they work out of their homes. These guys are on the road a lot. I don't believe any of them carry this equipment with them, but they are aware of it and how it works, obviously.
Yeah. And I just want to say that, like, offering that to small plants is huge, but if for the cost of this testing unit could save you a 3 days of shutdown, because if I imagine that if a plant can't test, then they may not have the systems put in place to recover quickly from a humane handling NR. What were you saying, David?
Oh, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I don't think that there's a shortcut. Just having the experience with the testing unit myself, I do think it's absolutely essential, even for a small plant.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that we were working on, I was working with Dr. Vogel from the University of Wisconsin. We were actually pre-COVID here now. We were actually looking at doing regional type or state meetings where we talk about animal welfare, we talk about proper stunning techniques, we go through maintenance and cleaning of the tools, and we would have a tester there, and attendees could come in and bring their equipment with them, and we would do a stun test right there at that seminar for them. That kind of all got kind of put to the wayside when the COVID hit and we couldn't do the traveling.
Yeah.
But those are the types of things that we are looking at as a company to put those types of programs together and be at like a small local hotel meeting room type of a thing. And we would do it after hours because we know these people are busy. They are business operators. They're typically open from 6 a.m. until 5 in the afternoon. So we were looking at doing this starting like at 5:30 or 6 o'clock and go until 8.
Yeah.
And do a 2.5 hour session and just give them, that time to ask questions and hear professionals talk about the equipment, how to maintain it and things like that. Whether we can get that operational and going again in 2021, yet to be seen. We don't know. But those are the types of things that we want to offer to our customers.
Well, my gears are spinning right now because, David, I do the Focus on Farming conference every year. And then 2 exits away, what is the the North American Meat Association has their conference. So it's like, imagine having something like that set up, and then it's, maybe a dairy farmer who has a captive bolt because he needs it on the farm, or maybe advertising that and also doing demos and running through would be huge.
Yeah.
I can say firsthand, Chuck, you did you were in San Luis Obispo last year in February, right?
That's correct.
I was at the California Meat Processors Association convention, and I saw you do your demo of the captive bolt devices, and I got to tell you, it was awesome. It was really cool. I was there with somebody from my company who he had zero experience with slaughter or knocking. He had never seen one. He was so stoked, and he came with me and watched that demo, and I learned things. I've been using these for a long time. I learned some things from you. He got to fire the device at the demo. I mean, he was pleased as punch. It was such a cool experience, and it was so informative. And I really can't recommend that training session enough. Having seen it.
Well, even today, David, and I encourage everyone to go to Bunzel's Instagram page, check out the hour video we did. For someone who's used that equipment or, these pieces of equipment off and on for 10 years, I learned so much of just like mechanics, how to, it's like, and I encourage people who are, slaughterhouse workers or kill floor workers, whatever you want to call them. Right. That if you're listening to this and you're a manager of a plant, send them over to watch that, because it's one thing to know how to do something. It's another thing to know why it works and how it works.
Yeah.
It's just not that I push this button and the animal's gone.
Yeah.
That understanding all the mechanics and the expansions and the bushings and why some things retract and some things don't. So I encourage people to head over there and watch that on Bunzel's Instagram page.
It's really rewarding for me to hear that. It's something I started doing some of that training type things in the group session like you were talking about at San Luis Obispo, David. So I do a lot of that at different universities at different times of the year. And you hit right on it. The most important thing is a lot of these students that are getting into the veterinary services and so forth, they're going to have to deal with euthanasia. They're going to have to deal with some type of equipment or whatever it might be. And we give them that opportunity to shoot the different tools that are available. And it really gives them some perspective. And what's really cool about it is I've been doing it for 10 or 15 years. Mm-hmm. And now some of those same students, they recognize me when I get into the plant to do audits and training, and they'll just introduce themselves that, hey, I got to shoot my first captive bolt because of you. And it really puts a whole different perspective on the equipment to have somebody that's going into that field that had never seen it, never touched it, to today they're actually in the plant. Maybe they're the humane handling person in that plant, whatever it might be. Mm-hmm. But it's rewarding. That part of my job is very rewarding.
That's awesome
to have that happen.
And just knowing that, there's in this industry, there's a lot of machismo and there's a lot of I know how to do this, but just really driving home, if you do this correctly, that the animal is going to be dispatched respectively, and to get that through to people is huge. And I think giving, and if we could get that mentality of that old school butcher to understand the mechanics and the why and the significance, I think this industry will just be better overall.
Yeah. And for me, we've heard it, and I see it firsthand with all the travels I've done over the years and done this. 99.9999% of these plant operators did not go to work in the morning to intentionally injure an animal.
Yeah.
Something happens.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that I think hopefully the public is starting to see that they care.
Yeah.
These people truly care for the well-being of that animal.
Yeah. And then I also just want to talk about the David, what would you, I guess what I'm trying to segue into is a routine training method, because we know about the overturn in this industry. That person who's knocking on that first visit you go to may not be there knocking the second time.
That's right.
Because maybe, hopefully, they moved up, but maybe they're. It's not. We have that the overturn issue in the animal harvesting part is.
Yeah. So. Oh, yeah. I was just going to mention that. One of the biggest things that I try to do when I manage a new plant, or when I work with clients now, or when we work with clients to develop a systematic, robust approach to humane handling, is it's not just the SOPs, and I would even argue that the SOPs are really the smallest part of those programs. It's really about the annual reassessment for all kill floor workers, and then having a really systematic and graduated patient program for stunners. Because I'll be honest with you, the first time I killed a beef was with you.
And I was an amazing teacher.
You were a very good teacher, but in that setting, not everybody would thrive, right? I wanted it super, super bad, but you and I both know that's not how we would necessarily do. We wouldn't take a training program to a facility. That's very
no. I wouldn't charge someone for what I put you through.
Yeah, but it was a good experience, though. We had fun.
Yeah.
But what we found is that there is a lot of mental impact. I mean, I think that probably all three of us have lost sleep thinking about knocking. We
absolutely.
things like that. And because it is incredibly high stress, right? And a lot of people need that stress home to their families. And so what I found was, and what we do now is we have this graduated program where we have several phases that you go through, and there's an observation phase, and there's different ways to practice, and it takes a long time, and it's very intentional to get through this graduated program. And by the time someone gets to that point where they're ready to knock alone or just supervised, they're confident. And they've had the practice under their belt, and they know how to maintain their tools, and they know how to handle the animals and what to look for and how to operate the head restraint and what to do if something goes sideways.
Right.
I think it's going to be a 2-part episode, because Travis, on our next episode, we're going to end up talking a little bit about placement and an actual method for stunning. But having the confidence behind you that you know what to do, and then you know exactly what to do if and when something goes sideways, because something always does. They're live animals, right?
Yeah. Something's going to happen. And, I bring that up in my presentation at the Animal Handling Conference. Mm-hmm. You've got a machine, you've got an animal, and you've got a human. Mm-hmm. Something is going to go wrong.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, no, geez. That cough made me. I think you were talking about the mental aspect, David. I know when I had to take over a knocking position at a place I worked, and because of a horrible incident that you know about, but we don't need to let people relive that. But during that, when we're rewriting our program during that time, I said, no one's going to knock anything until we have a head restraint. And I know then later you came on board, and luckily, when you knocked that beef, it was in head restraint. But I think this is a good question that we come back to. But a lot of people were asking about head restraint, and there's this nomenclature or misperception of headlocks, squeeze chutes, and things like that, of adding more stress, when if you see it instantly happen, it calms down a riled animal.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely. Head restraint in today's world is growing more and more important, from the large plant to the small plant. Especially in small plants, if you have that open beef knock box, or a lot of plants that I go into have just the gating. Mm-hmm. They walk into a gate and they swing open the gate after they've shot or stunned the animal. It falls out onto the floor. By adding that stanchion, if you will, or that head restraint type of a system, first and foremost, you can eliminate the firearm, a dangerous weapon, out of that kill floor. Yeah. You can eliminate that. Should get 100% accuracy on your stun with a captive bolt gun. Make it a more effective and safer operation within your plant by putting that head restraint in. Yeah. And I know there's several different designs out there, but some of them are pretty simple. You get into some of them where they have a full chin lift, and they've got a pole block at the back of the head, and they completely 100% restrain that head. Yeah. But in most cases, you don't need that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. I work with a lot of clients that are building small kill floors on their farms because they want to either have a custom exempt or even USDA. If someone is building a kill floor, can they call your team and ask for suggestions on chutes, squeeze chutes, head restraints? Do you provide suggestions or solutions?
So I have contacts. Great. Different manufacturing companies. We don't sell that particular equipment anymore. We did in the past, but I have several contacts with which we can get them in touch with. As a matter of fact, there's a new little plant going up in, I believe it was in Idaho, that we just put in contact with the company that's going to build them a full head restraint chute, beef knockbox chute. Yes.
That's great. Thank you for sharing that, because I know a lot of people will be very interested to know that. We're going to provide your contact info for our listeners. One thing I did want to mention is I've said it a few times now. Travis, you said it when we talk about things going sideways or going horribly when it comes to stunning.
Mm-hmm.
I would say 95%, 99% of those times is when something unexpected happens and then the person doesn't know what to do next.
Yep.
Yeah, it's in that pause.
So one big recommendation I have started the last 3 years. Imagine you're the person. You're that person standing there in that knockbox area that it happened to. Who does he have watching him? He's got coworkers. He's got probably a supervisor or a plant owner. And depending, he may even have an inspector standing over his shoulder that just watched something happen that he didn't wish to happen.
Yeah.
Think of the stress level on that person. My recommendation has been that obviously you want to have multiple people trained for the job. Don't allow that person to do the second shot. It's got to be rendered immediately. You know, the proper handling technique. If you have a misstun and you've got a sensible animal, there's no question about it. You've got to have a second piece of equipment there, whether it's another captive bolt gun or a weapon. But the animal needs to be addressed first and foremost. And best practice is if you have a person that just did that and they know that something went wrong, sometimes that over emotion, the stress can cause them to maybe inflict a second shot that may not be effective. Again. So best practice would be to have a secondary person on the ready to do that second shot.
And at that point, when we're looking at that second shot being rendered ineffective, you're done for the day.
That's right.
And so that's why I think it's so important for cross-training and all this. And then if I've had to deal with this personally, and I know a bunch of people who've had, you have that mess up, it was corrected or whatever. Maybe there's a day lapse. When you come back, there may be a vet there watching you now. There may be 2 members of the USCA. A farmer may be there. Everyone on the kill floor is watching your first shot to see if this guy still has it, which is incredibly just bearing down on you of it. Not only like the stress of that you have to, knock this animal, but now you look at it that, okay, there's a kill floor of 5 people. 5 people who are watching me are counting on me of making this done right, so they have work for the week.
Right.
Right. And I call it the yips. Like in baseball or basketball, when you just get in your head and you're just terrible. Like, oh, I can't make shots anymore. I can't catch anymore. But this is with much higher stakes.
Exactly, a lot higher stakes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so true. Okay, great. We've had a lot of questions, like I said, that are really about method, and I think we're going to say that for part 2. But I do have another question. Just in your experience with the plants that you've traveled to, and Travis, this is really for both of you guys. Do you find that animals, it's better to slaughter an animal right off the trailer, or do you think it's better to let them set overnight? This is a question from one of our listeners.
I don't see a benefit of it setting overnight. I imagine the listener is trying to minimize the stress of travel that an animal may have. I feel like there's a lot of anamorphizing of emotions on animals that maybe the animal isn't as bothered by loading and unloading as we would think that it would be bothered by.
Right.
But certainly if you notice something that an animal is stressed or high strung or 100% doesn't like the new environment it's in, I would encourage you not to knock that animal.
Right. Well, and I think another factor is distance. How far did it travel on that trailer? What were the weather conditions? Was it, you're traveling through the desert and you've gone 150 miles and 100-degree temperatures, get the animal off the trailer, let it hydrate, get some water in it, let it settle down a little bit. But I don't know necessarily, I'm not an expert on this, but overnight I think would be a little excessive for that.
Yeah.
I think to give it a chance to acclimate itself to the environment that it's been moved into, get some hydration and things like that. I don't see any reason to hold overnight in a situation like that.
Now, if it's a trailer with a big step on or something like that, and it was hard to get on or hard to get off, and you just know the animal's stressed, then I would say that the more time to cool it down would be better. But also, I come at it from how many animals are you doing that day? Or do you have the ability to isolate that one? Is it going to mess up your production?
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm with you guys. I think it's really subjective. Hogs on a hot day, I think it's good to if it's going to continue to be hot all night, it's not a bad idea to get them off the trailer and get them into the chute. I think it really depends if it's a super rangy animal. We used to slaughter these animals that were out from the Arcata area in California, super rangy coastal beef, and they come into the plant and they were just like Broncos. I mean, it was bonkers. But I think also, this to this listener, you got to think about your bottom line, because if you get into the habit of holding animals overnight, they have to have adequate food as per USDA regulation and ultimately custom exempt regulation, because in custom exempt humane handling, USDA still wants you to employ the same techniques for humane handling. You're exempt from paperwork, but you still have to treat animals the exact same way. So if you're going to be keeping over a dozen animals every night and that becomes your SOP for animal receiving, all of a sudden you're feeding 12 animals. What's it going to cost you for a half a bale or a bale of hay per day for how many animals every day per week? I mean, that's not a cheap endeavor there, holding animals over. So
yeah, and then you also ask risk of having like dirty animals because your pen conditions, and then like everything, you have a bad trough system and you have an animal that just kicks it over immediately, and then you have an NR and that's why I give animals bottles of water. It's in there. I'm joking. And then also, like, with overnight, like, say you had that transport, right? Because I used to receive carcasses from like the Carolinas, or not animals from the Carolinas, and then come up to Vermont, and then that overnight temperature shock, we'd end up with Jerseys or Holsteins that may not make it to processing the next day because they were cold anyway.
Right.
And then you just that's the schedule we unfortunately had, but I would minimize everything you can to do that, because then that animal is just passing away in vain and no one could utilize it.
Yeah, you just render it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. So Chuck, we're going to have a lot of people who are going to want to get a hold of you and your team and talk about solutions or trainings or equipment that they'd like to get their hands on. How can our listeners get a hold of you?
The easiest way for me is just call me on my mobile phone. That number is 319-573-6121, or they can email me at charles.bildstein@bunzel, B-U-N-Z as in zebra, L-USA.com. Anytime.
And those are going to be the first things in the show notes. There'll be Chuck's contact information. So before in the show notes, will be that.
Right. And just to reiterate, for our company, I am the beneficiary of a very supportive employer. Bunzel Processor Division is 100% committed to helping our customers, no matter what size, whether they are a small operation in Vermont, or if it's a large integrated company, the Cargills, the JBSs, the Tysons, and so forth. We provide our services. Ryan and I both do. We provide our services to all those plants for on-site type demonstrations, for troubleshooting, for if there's issues, we provide resolution meetings for that. And there's never a cost, no matter where you're at. Bunzel, we don't ever have a charge for those types of services. We also have, obviously, Jarvis. If one of us can't get to them soon enough, we can contact that local Jarvis technician and get them to that location quickly.
Okay. And then also, this episode is going to come out in the next few days. So the Jarvis Catapult, you guys got two great things happening in March with that.
Yes.
So let's touch base real quick on that, and then Yeah. So what are you guys doing with the captive bolt?
So we have a magazine called At a Glance. And in the March At a Glance magazine, we're doing a promotion on Jarvis captive bolt equipment, where the tools are all on a sale price schedule right now. And this actually will end in May 31st. We are giving a $400 account credit to any account that trades in any competitive model. So as an example, on one of the pistols, just to give you an idea, the sale price on a pistol today is $1,536. If you have a competitive unit you want to trade in, you're going to get a $400 credit for that. So your net cost is $1,136 on that pistol stunner. That's just an example. And that goes through May 31st. The other thing that we're doing in March is we have a very popular inline tool that has been picked up. We are doing a stunner giveaway that they can register for a free stunner. We're going to have the drawing at the end of March.
Yeah. And that right there, I've been promoting it through my social media platforms. I've been sending the link to just people I know in the industry. So everyone, if you're listening, that link will also be in the show notes. That's huge. I think that could elevate really, if you're a custom guy, you should have this. If you're USDA, you should also have this as well. But this is going to be something huge for, let's say, a small business that like really wants to have a backup approach, or to have a state of an art piece of equipment when it comes to knocking. And this I view this as a huge positive thing that could change many businesses for way better.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. We've worked pretty hard on our program. We now have videos for about 90% of the stunners that talks about safe handling, how to use the tool properly, cleaning, daily cleanings and maintenance and troubleshooting and things like that.
Yeah.
So those links are all available as well with any of our equipment that we've got out there.
Awesome.
Yeah. I personally, I own 2 captive bolt devices. I've got an inline and I've got a pistol grip. I take them both. When I do custom work, there are certain situations where a 22 mag is ideal, but they're few and far between. And I kill a lot of sheep and lambs, and there's nothing better than a captive bolt for that. Whether it's custom USDA, doesn't matter. That is by far the best, in my opinion, the best tool for dispatching sheep and lamb, especially in the field, but definitely in a facility, without a doubt. I catch a lot of flack from old school people because a lot of people are really dedicated to the 22. But when it comes to any species, I really
yeah. And don't get me wrong, there is a time and place for a weapon. If you've got an agitated large animal, I'm going to be the first to tell you, I'm not going and putting my hand up on his forehead. If I've got an agitated beef animal in front of me, I'm probably going to grab a weapon myself.
Yeah.
So
we used to have a USDA inspector that wore a World War II helmet because he said one time he heard a ricochet because we were using 22 mag. So I view it as this. It's like, eliminate everything that could possibly go wrong.
Yeah, that's right.
It's like, if you're using it for, like, if you could touch the animal, then use a captive bolt. Like my dad used to say, let's look at what could go right here versus what could go wrong.
Minimum risk assessment. That's what we do every day in our line of work.
Yeah. And then, Chuck, is there anything else you wanted to talk about before we get out of here?
Well, the big thing is maintenance. We want to make sure the animal's treated humanely. And if you're using captive bolt tools, if you have not torn that tool apart, or if you don't know how to tear it apart, contact that manufacturer right away. Get the proper procedures. If you shoot it, clean it. That doesn't mean after every shot. If you are in operation and you use your stunner once a week and it's on Tuesday, don't wait until Friday to clean it. If you shot it on Tuesday, clean it on Tuesday. Inspect it, clean it, do whatever you have to do to make sure it's in proper working condition. So when you show up, your slaughter guy shows up on the next Tuesday, it's in great operating condition.
Yeah.
Don't put it off.
Exactly. And if you have a rotating floor, and make sure the person who picks that up double checks, because as I was taught, that guy doesn't work there. The guy who does everything correctly doesn't work there.
Right.
So double check yourself.
That's right.
All right, David. I just want to say big thanks to Chuck Bildstein, as well as Bunzel Processor Division. Thanks so much. Thanks everyone over there. Don, you're amazing, helping set up and organize these, and your continuous support of butchery in general. And yeah, thank you. Check them out. All their information will be in the show notes. We're going to have a later episode. David and I are going to discuss about placement of where to actually knock. David and I have done it literally countless of times. I'm somewhere in the 20,000 range of animals that I've dispatched. And when I say that, most of them are chickens using an electric knife. Anyway, still factor in and get those numbers up if that's important, which it shouldn't be. And now I sound weird. But anyway, keep your knife sharp, live in the margin, support Bunzel. And yeah, if you have humane handling questions, or you have questions about your stunning system, contact them. Contact Chuck, because I don't know if you picked up, he covers the entire North America. Maybe reach out, say like, I'm looking to upgrade my system or replace an antiquated system. Send in your old captive bull, get that $400 return, and enter for the contest. Thank you so much. And until next time, keep your knives sharp and live in the margin.